Hello, my name is Miranda. Welcome to my book talk. This go around, the subject is going to be You Don't Have to Say You Love Me, a memoir by Sherman Alexie. As the title suggests, this book is a memoir about the life of Sherman Alexie. It begins with his birth, including the medical complications involved, and more or less follows a chronological pattern to present day through his childhood, teenagerdom, the evolution of his career to modern day. What I like most about this book, though, is that it does not read like a dry biography type book. It's not just explaining events that happened. It's very fluid in its storytelling, and there might be an event that will remind him of something else that happened, and there will be a flashback to a different period. This book is also different from a traditional memoir in that it often focuses on one specific issue. In this case, the grief Sherman Alexie is dealing with after the death of his mother, and it follows his grieving process. And throughout the book, interspersed throughout different chapters, there are also poems. I think it really shows Sherman Alexie's true artistry. I enjoyed getting to finish a chapter, and rather than launch into the next event in his life, there would be a poem, and it was almost like a little wrap-up or a little summary. It was a chance for the reader to reflect. It was a reprieve, and it just made me appreciate the book and what he was saying that much more. One of the reasons that I love Sherman Alexie so much, he's been one of my favorite authors for years, is that his writing packs an emotional punch, and that's definitely true with this book. I think one of those emotional punches is perfectly displayed in one of the poems that I very much enjoy in this book. On page 262, the poem titled Glacial Pace. When I was 13, I coughed on some ice chips, and my mother quickly rose and belted me hard on the back 1, 2, 3, 4 times. Later, I said, "Mom, it was ice. It was gonna melt." I was angry at her, maybe because I needed reasons to be pissed at her, but she always turned life into a play. She was a mother portrayed by an actor. When I told my wife the ice chips story, she said, Hey, I'm on your mother's side with this one. You can choke to death on ice. Your mother was trying to save your life." I scoffed, but then did an internet search and learned that an ice cube can strangle you if it's large enough and blocks the airway. Then it becomes a race. Will that ice cube melt and slide free before you suffocate? I told my wife what I'd learned, and she smiled and said, "Now you're racing against the ice. Will you forgive your mother before you die?" That was probably one of my favorite poems in the book. I think this quote is an excellent representation of this book as a whole, and explains Alexie's view that grief is so complicated, and it's about pain and sadness and depression, but also guilt. And I think that young adults can learn a lot about that lesson and a lot from this book in general. I think specifically this book might be good for young adults who read The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, maybe when they're younger and they're a little older now, and they can see the older non-fictionalized version of the events of his life. I also think this book is useful for young adults in general because it's about family, and family isn't always pretty and it's not always easy. And also, a lot of this book is about not giving up, and it's about perseverance. Regardless of every issue that Sherman Alexie had to face, he found a way to fight through it, usually through his writing, and instead of giving up, he decided to tell his story, and I think that's a very valuable lesson for young adults. I know this book, as well as all of the works of Sherman Alexie, are sort of controversial at this moment in light of the revelations about his behavior, but if we're purely focusing on books themselves rather than the authors behind them, I think this should absolutely be recommended to young adults or any readers in general. I thought it was a beautiful book, and though the focus on grief was very sad, I thought it was very powerful, and I was very glad to have read it. That concludes this book talk. Thank you very much.